Hey guys, have you ever been in a church service and it wrapped up with the minister saying, I want everybody to come down who needs to get their heart right with God? And I remember being in a service like this lately, and I just thought, man, what would that take for me to get my heart right with God? And the reality is every single human on the planet has their heart right with God because of the finished works of Christ, not because of their groveling and bawling and fasting and praying and giving. The reality is that Jesus isn't quite the miserable failure that a lot of religious people like to pretend he is when he came to take away the sins of the world. Romans 5:18 says, just as one trespass, the first Adam, his trespass resulted, past tense, in condemnation for all men, so also one act of righteousness resulted, past tense, it's a done deal, it resulted in justification and life for all men. All men are justified. 2 Corinthians 5 tells us that God doesn't count our sins against us anymore, and that he's reconciled all of humanity to himself. Colossians 3:11 talks about how Christ is all and in all. And the only way you can it's a fake way that you can not have your heart right with God is in your own imaginations. Colossians 1:21 tells us about how we were enemies of God in our minds. 2 Corinthians 6:12 talks about how we were hindered by our own affections, our own feelings, because we weren't walking by faith. We were walking by feelings, walking by sight, and so forth. But the reality is from God's perspective, because God the Father doesn't consider Christ, his Son, an abject failure with what he did on the cross. He doesn't consider him a failure when he came to take away the sins of the world, to save the world, to seek and save those who were lost. And so from his perspective, because of the finished works of Christ, your heart is right with God. And it's interesting how religious people, when they look at Romans 5:18, and they see how with one man's act of disobedience, Adam, the first Adam, all were, received condemnation, they go, absolutely, there's no question about that, everybody's filthy and so forth. But when they keep reading and they say the last Adam had one act of obedience that resulted in justification and life for all people, they tend to shift into walking by sight, not by faith. And I just want to encourage you, your heart is right with God, and doesn't have anything to do with what you've done. It has to do with what he did. Thanks.